Good morning, this is Stuart Davidson, your friendly QS, and I just thought I'd jump on. I think we're just starting to see signs of construction sites starting up again. I know with a number of our projects, we're looking to get restarted. There's a large project in Woolwich that looks like it's going to restart next week. So I think people are kind of gradually thinking about how they're going to start getting on with things again. The Construction Leadership Council have issued a site operations protocol, a third edition, which I think is really good guidance. So if you've got a construction project that you're thinking of doing, or you've got one that's kind of come to a bit of a standstill that you want to get up and running again, the guidance is there, so you can look it up, CLC, SOP protocol. And it's got some good advice in there, because remember, the government have always said that sites are to keep open, and they're encouraging construction sites to start up again and keep going. Now, I know the concerns about contracts and responsibilities around those issues, and particularly health and safety. Now, that's a key one. Obviously, you need to make sure everybody's safe. The operations on site are able to be carried out in accordance with the protocol. And obviously, if they can't, then obviously you can't carry on with the work. But it might be a way of it might be a way of getting things going again. Now, it's a good thing in a way that we're kind of seeing a bit of movement. But the other catalyst I think that's happening is that we're looking at new ways of working. So we've seen how office staff can work from home, operations that can be done from home. We've seen that businesses are pivoting to provide more information, maybe online courses, different things like that, doing more marketing. But when it comes to the practicality of sites, working on construction sites or in factories or at places you can't do from home, seeing some really ingenious things happening out there. What can we do to work differently? And in construction, there's so much that can be done in a different way. But it's kind of, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. And this could be the start of things to make things better, to make things safer. How can we work on certain tasks where normally we would need two guys together very closely working? How can we do that task differently, whereby they don't need to be 2 meters that close to each other? Or is there PPE that we can use that would make things safe? But it's a really good thing that things are starting to move. People are starting to be innovative. Sites are starting to think about, okay, we can start up again. We can get things going again. We just need to do it differently. There are the issues around productivity. And are we going to cover our costs? Are we going to be able to manage our cash flow? Have we aligned our cash flow with our funding? There's a big thing to think about. If you have got a project that did stop that you want to get started again, there again you're going to need to do the due diligence on your supply chain again, due diligence on your contractor again, maybe take a bit more control over the cash flowing through the project, maybe control over where that cash goes, who's making those payments. Can you make them direct from investor to supply chain, to contractor supply chain? Can you take control that way? Have you spoken to your financier? And I think this is really important, is that have you realigned your drawdowns for your project with the cash flow in the project? Because the rate of productivity is going to change. So the amount of drawdowns is going to change. The rate at which the lender sees their exposure is going to change. Also, your supply chain, their exposure is going to change. Deliveries are going to change. Your program's going to change. Overheads and costs are going to change. So you really want to just do an overview on your project from a logistic strategic perspective, from a cash perspective, just from a contractual perspective, and just to see how that kind of stacks up. So do your numbers, do your cash flow forecast again,
so that you're doing, I think you need a bit of pre-planning, but it's a really good time now if you're thinking of doing projects to start planning your projects. We've been interestingly, as a QS practice, we've been getting quite a lot of inquiries over the last week. You know, there are developers that are approaching us with sites that they're thinking about doing. You know, can you do an appraisal on this? Does this stack up? You know, and we've had some rather large sites come forward that we've been looking at. You know, we generally do for developers, for our clients, we generally do a high level appraisal. So it's a kind of something we do very, very quickly. Is it a project? Does it stack up? We test the GDV. We test all the costs in there. What's the residual value in that project? Not only from a capital perspective, but also does it stack up if you're depending on what your exit strategy is, whether you're going to privately rent, flip, or a mixture of the two. So we can quite quickly say, okay, this is a project that is worth pursuing. This is probably the range of price that you want to offer for your site or your project. And then, of course, with contractors, you know, knowing the health of the contractor, how have they fared during the stop-down period, you know, doing due diligence on them again. It's kind of slightly more subtle, different way of doing it, but you're still pre-qualifying them. Are they okay? What can you do? You want the same skills, expertise on the project. Also, bearing in mind what your contract says, you still want those you may want that expertise, those people that know the project to carry on with the project. They may have their pressures. They may have other demands on their cash at the moment. So think about, as a vendor, owner, financier, what you can do to help them, what you can do to help your supply chain. Now, it might be that you can make one of the things, I know I keep plugging this, but making direct payments rather than expecting the supply chain to bring those payments back in, or to juggle it themselves. You kind of, it's almost a way of ring fencing the money within your project so that the money doesn't leak out, that you don't become exposed, that you're not paying money to somebody who might be struggling with demands on his cash elsewhere. So you kind of want that management in place. I think it's very important starting up. Once you get up and running again, fine. But I think over this kind of period where we're starting to take baby steps into restarting, I think you kind of need that little bit of an assessment, that little bit of reevaluation that things are going to work, that you've got you program your cash flow, you everybody's on board, you know, that everybody's okay, your supply chain is still okay, you've still got the same people on site. What's their pressures? What's their issues? Can we get up and running? But certainly I'm seeing some inquiries. I'm seeing projects getting up and running again. One of our projects, a large project in London, is starting again next week. You know, gradual steps. You know, there was a lot of talk in the early days, and I know solicitors and lawyers are still talking about the adequacy of standard forms of contract, or the inadequacy of standard form of contract to deal with this kind of coronavirus shutdown, lockdown thing. There's everybody's talked about it. I probably don't need to go over and over it, but there are a number of concerns about the adequacy of contract terms. Having said that, I think it's going to pave the way to a different type of contracts. I think contracts need to be slightly more simple, straight to the point, cover the key areas, and certainly they'll be introducing this scenario into standard forms. I also think that there'll be other provisions within the contract that enable step-in for clients to retain management of cash flow, not necessarily management of the contract or the management of the works, because it may be that we still want a contractor to maintain management of the works, maybe bring in a supply chain, getting paid for bringing that supply chain to the project. But I think we're going to see a difference in the importance of management, maybe a third-party management of cash and payments through the project. That will help the supply chain and the contractor in terms of his cash flow. He knows these overheads and profit are ring-fenced. He knows that he may get a fee for bringing his supply chain to the project. He knows that under the standard forms he has the the authority to manage the project manage the suppliers and the supply chain, carry out the certification of the works. But then I think it's important for investors going forward, lenders going forward, vendors going forward, to have more control over the cash, to enable so that it doesn't leak out, that nobody within the supply chain gets put under too much pressure, that we can bring new expertise, new skills, new experts into projects where they may not have qualified previously. So I think that will be key changes going forward. It's exciting, really, and I think when these sorts of things happen, we have to re-evaluate what we've been doing and how we've been doing things, how we've structured contracts in the past, and how we might re-evaluate them to make them slightly simpler and maybe more appropriate for today's age. You know, we need to make cash flow faster, and in whose hands is it best to leave that management in whose hands is it best to leave the expertise for solving complex construction problems, and in whose hands is it best to leave the expertise for managing the complex nature of cash flow through supply chains. So there's all these things that are happening, but we are taking baby steps to get going again. We're seeing sites doing that. As I said earlier, that we get more inquiries now from developers that are thinking about new sites that they want to get started and up and running. Key thing is pre-planning, not just pre-planning around the architectural side or the planning side or the drawings, but pre-planning your cash. How's the cash going to work? How's it going to come back? When you're going to get your return on investment? Who's going to control that cash in the project? You know, are you re-evaluating where your financiers are in terms of their perception of their risk exposure post COVID-19? So there's lots of things to think about, but things are changing, and I think it's a catalyst for change. Hopefully it's going to be for the better, and you know, hopefully it's going to be for the construction industry that I've always felt that it punches well below its weight in terms of wealth creation. I think that's going to improve. I think we're going to do things much, much better. New methods of working on site, safer methods of working on site, better methods of managing cash through construction, better ways of encouraging and bringing in expertise into a project, better methods of contracting, a re-evaluation of standard forms of contract and culture. So these are times of opportunity. I think when you hit a crisis, I think that's a time when you really the industry can dig deep and think about, are we going to go back to where we were with the adversarial ways of working, the slow movement of cash, maybe not always a great efficiency of how we throw different trades together and expect them to overcome complex construction projects and programs on site. You know, is this a catalyst to make things better, to think about how we do things, you know, to make the industry more slicker, you know, to get rid of some of the old practices of the necessity of cash farming and robbing Peter to pay Paul and all those kind of things. So there you go. So I just wanted to jump on, and I think things are starting to get going again. So if you're thinking about starting a new project, then think about your planning, your cash flow, the logistics of your project, and the sequencing of your project as well. Because get sequencing and logistics wrong, and that can mean a disaster for your project. It's the difference between success and failure. So it's not just about how much is this going to cost at a meter rate or that kind of thing. A meter rate is only a meter rate when the work's sequenced in a certain way and the logistics are a certain way, you know. So you need to take it all in the round. So planning is key. Lots of planning, maybe some commercial planning before you think about putting pen to paper and drafting and commissioning drawings and specifications. You know, think about how you're going to procure your project. Does it stack up? What's your cash flow? What's your access strategy from the point at which you purchase your site through to day one drawdown? how you're going to construct the project, what type of contractor, what type of procurement, what's your exit strategy. Are you going to flip? Are you going to privately rent? Are you going to do a mixture of the two? How long is that going to take? Does that line up with your project cash flow and your project lending? And does the pace at which you can construct and sell or rent your projects, your properties at the end, does that line up with your lender's cash flow? So these things are things that you can plan out, map out before you get started to give you the best chance of getting great results from your property journey and property project. So this is Stuart Davidson. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.